Ilara sat by her bedroom window, watching her younger sister Lucy dance in the garden below. Lucy moved like a flower in the wind, her thin body spinning and twirling in a white dress that made her look like an angel. Men from all over the kingdom came to ask for Lucy's hand in marriage. They brought gifts of gold and jewels, hoping to win her heart. Ilara touched her own round face and sighed. She was nothing like Lucy. Where Lucy was thin and small, Ilara was large and strong. Where Lucy had golden hair that shone in the sun, Ilara had dark brown hair that never seemed to stay in place. Where Lucy got praise and attention, Ilara got looks of disappointment. At 19 years old, Ilara should have been married by now. That's what her father, Lord Aldrich, reminded her every single day. He would look at her across the dinner table with cold eyes and shake his head. Sometimes he would compare her to Lucy, wondering out loud why his older daughter couldn't be more like his younger one. The worst part was the marriage meetings. Every few weeks, some poor man would come to meet Ilara. Her father would put on his best smile and try to sell her like a piece of furniture. The men would sit politely, drink tea and make small talk, but Ilara could see it in their eyes. They were not interested. Some looked disgusted. Others looked bored. A few even looked angry, as if they felt tricked into coming. After each failed meeting, her father's anger grew stronger. He would pace around his study, shouting about how embarrassing it was to have a daughter who couldn't find a husband. He blamed Ilara for eating too much, for not trying hard enough to be pretty, for being lazy. But Ilara knew the truth. She knew her father was ashamed of her. One morning in early spring, Ilara woke up to the sound of her father shouting downstairs. She put on her robe and crept to the top of the stairs to listen. Her father was talking to someone about money. He owed a large debt to a man in the north, and he didn't have enough gold to pay it back. The other man's voice was rough and mean. He said that Lord Aldrich had 1 week to pay, or there would be trouble. Big trouble. Ilara's heart beat fast as she listened. Her family was in danger and she didn't know how to help. That afternoon, her father called her to his study. The room smelled like old books and wine. Her father sat behind his big wooden desk, looking older than usual. His face was red, and his hands shook a little. "Sit down, Ilara," he said without looking at her. She sat in the hard chair across from him and waited. Her father stared out the window for a long time before speaking. "You have been a problem for this family," he said, slowly. "You eat our food, wear our clothes, and live in our house, but you give nothing back. You can't find a husband. You can't bring honor to our name. You are useless." Each word hit Ilara like a punch. She wanted to cry, but she held back her tears. She had heard these words before, but they still hurt every time. "I have found a solution," her father continued. "There is a man in the north who I owe money to, Lord Marcus of the Grey Hills. He has agreed to take you instead of the gold I owe him." Ilara's blood turned cold. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "You will go to live with him. You will work for him. You will do whatever he asks. In return, my debt will be paid." Her father finally looked at her, and his eyes were like ice. "It's the only thing you're good for." Ilara stood up so fast that her chair fell over. "Father, you can't mean this. You're selling me like a cow." "I'm getting rid of a problem," he said. "Lord Marcus needs servants. You need a purpose. It works perfectly." "But I'm your daughter," Ilara cried. Tears were flowing down her face now, and she didn't care anymore. "How can you do this to me?" Her father stood up and walked around the desk. For a moment, Ilara thought he might hug her, might say he was sorry. Instead, he pointed to the door. "Pack your things. You leave tomorrow morning, and don't embarrass me any more than you already have." That night, Ilara lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling. She could hear Lucy crying in the next room. Her sister had begged their father to change his mind, but he wouldn't listen. Their mother had died when Ilara was 10, and since then their father had become harder and colder each year. Ilara thought about running away, but where could she go? She had no money, no friends who could help her, and no skills that would let her live on her own. She was trapped, just like her father wanted. As the sun came up, Ilara packed her few belongings into a small bag. She had 3 dresses, a warm cloak, a few books, and a silver necklace that had belonged to her mother. Everything she owned in the world fit into one bag. Lucy came to say goodbye, her eyes red from crying. "I'll miss you so much," she whispered, as they hugged. "Take care of yourself," Ilara said. "And don't let Father make you feel bad about this. It's not your fault." The wagon that would take her north was waiting outside. The driver was an old man with kind eyes who looked sorry for her. Ilara climbed into the back of the wagon and looked at her home one last time. Her father stood in the doorway watching her leave. His face showed no sadness, no regret, nothing. He was getting rid of her, and he was happy about it. As the wagon rolled away, Ilara understood something clearly for the first time. Her father didn't love her. Maybe he never had. She wasn't just fat or ugly or disappointing. She was unwanted. She was a problem to be solved, not a daughter to be loved. The wagon bumped along the road, taking her away from everything she had ever known. Ilara didn't know what waited for her in the north, but she knew it couldn't be worse than staying, with a father who saw her as nothing more than a burden to be thrown away. The wagon wheels made a steady bumping sound as they rolled over the rough road. Ilara sat in the back, holding her small bag close to her chest. The old driver had told her his name was Tom, and he seemed like a good man. But even his kind words couldn't make her feel better about what was happening. For the first 3 days, they traveled through lands that Ilara knew. She saw farms where her father bought grain and villages where she had gone to market with her mother years ago. The memories made her heart ache. This was the last time she would ever see these places. On the 4th day, everything changed. The farms disappeared and the road became harder and rockier. The trees grew thicker and darker. The air got colder, even though it was supposed to be spring. Tom put an extra blanket around Ilara's shoulders and shook his head. "The north is a hard place," he said. "Not like the warm lands you come from." That night they stopped at a small inn. The building was old and dirty, with a roof that looked like it might fall down. Inside, the air was thick with smoke from a fire that didn't give much heat. Ilara sat at a table in the corner, trying to eat a bowl of soup that tasted like water. At the next table, 3 men were talking in low voices. They kept looking at her, and Ilara tried to listen to what they were saying. "Another girl going north," one of them said. "Poor thing probably doesn't know what she's getting into." "Lord Marcus has been taking a lot of people lately," said another. "Servants, workers, anyone he can get his hands on. They say he needs them for his mines." The third man laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Mines are dangerous work. Half the people who go in don't come out." Ilara's soup suddenly tasted like nothing. Mines. Her father had told her she would be a servant, but he hadn't said anything about mines. She tried to tell herself that the men were just gossiping, but fear grew in her stomach like a cold stone. The next morning, Tom looked worried as he helped her back into the wagon. "Miss Ilara," he said quietly, "I've been thinking. Maybe we should turn around. Go back to your father. Beg him to change his mind." Ilara shook her head. "He won't change his mind. He made that very clear." Tom sighed and climbed onto his seat. "Then we keep going. But I want you to know, if things get bad up there, really bad, you can always try to find me. I live in Millfield, about 2 days south of here. Ask anyone where old Tom the wagon driver lives and they'll point you the right way." As they traveled, further north they met other people on the road. Most of them were going south, away from where Ilara was headed. When these travelers saw her in the wagon, their faces showed pity. Some crossed themselves like they were seeing someone who was already dead. One woman with gray hair stopped the wagon and spoke to Tom. "You're not taking that poor girl to Lord Marcus, are you?" she asked. "I have to," Tom said sadly. "It's my job." The woman looked at Ilara with tears in her eyes. "Child, if you have any family anywhere else, any friends, anyone at all, go to them instead. Don't go to Lord Marcus." "Why?" Ilara asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. The woman glanced around, as if someone might be listening. My brother worked for him, in the mines. He came home after 6 months, but he wasn't the same. Thin as a stick, scared of his own shadow. Said Lord Marcus worked people until they dropped dead. Said the man had no heart, no soul. After the woman left, Tom and Alara didn't talk much. The wagon kept rolling north, but now every mile felt like a step closer to a grave. On the 6th day, they entered a land that looked like winter, even though it was spring everywhere else. The trees had no leaves. The grass was brown and dead. Even the sky looked gray and sick. Alara pulled her cloak tighter around her body, but the cold seemed to go right through her clothes and into her bones. They passed a group of people walking south on the road. They looked thin and tired, like they hadn't eaten in weeks. Their clothes were dirty and torn. When they saw the wagon, they moved to the side quickly, keeping their heads down. Refugees, Tom said quietly. Running away from the north. That night they stayed at another inn, but this one was even worse than the last. The soup was cold, the bread was hard, and the beds had bugs. Alara lay awake all night, listening to the wind howl outside like a wild animal. In the morning, Tom looked older than before. Miss Alara, he said, we're only 2 days away from Lord Marcus's land now. This is your last chance to change your mind. Alara thought about it. She really did. But where could she go? She had no money to pay Tom to take her somewhere else. She had no friends or family who would take her in. Her father had made sure she had no choices. I have to keep going, she said. Tom nodded sadly. Then I'll pray for you, miss. Every night, for the rest of my life. As they got closer to their destination, the land got worse and worse. They passed empty villages where all the windows were broken and the doors hung open like dead mouths. They saw fields that should have been green, with spring crops, but instead were brown and empty. What happened here? Alara asked. Lord Marcus happened, Tom said. He takes everything. Food, animals, people. Leaves nothing behind. On the 8th day, they saw it in the distance. A huge, dark castle on top of a hill, with walls as black as night. Even from far away, it looked evil. Smoke rose from its towers, like the breath of a sleeping dragon. That's where we're going, Tom said, and his voice shook a little. As they got closer, Alara could see more details. The castle was surrounded by a high wall with sharp spikes on top. Guards with weapons walked back and forth along the walls. Below the castle, there were smaller buildings that looked like they might be barracks or workshops. The road leading to the castle was full of people, but these weren't happy people going to a market or a festival. These were people with chains around their hands and feet, being led by guards with whips. They all looked thin and tired and scared. Slaves, Tom whispered. Lord Marcus uses slaves to work his mines. Alara's heart started beating so fast, she thought it might burst. She wasn't just being sent to work as a servant. She was being sent to be a slave. The wagon stopped at the castle gates. 2 guards came over, both big men with scars on their faces and cruel eyes. What do you want? One of them asked Tom. I have a delivery for Lord Marcus, Tom said. His voice was steady, but Alara could see his hands shaking as he held the reins. The guard looked at Alara like she was a piece of meat. Another worker, eh? Lord Marcus will be pleased. He always needs more workers. The gates opened with a loud, creaking sound like the mouth of a giant beast. Tom drove the wagon into the courtyard, and Alara got her first real look at her new home. It was worse than she had imagined. The courtyard was full of people, but it was the quietest place Alara had ever seen. Men and women moved around carrying heavy loads, cleaning weapons, or fixing broken things. But nobody talked. Nobody laughed. They all kept their eyes down and worked like their lives depended on it. Tom helped Alara down from the wagon, and she could see tears in his old eyes. I'm sorry, miss, he whispered. If I could take you anywhere else, I would. Before Alara could answer, a guard grabbed her arm roughly. Come on, he said. Lord Marcus is waiting. Alara looked back at Tom one last time. He raised his hand in a small wave. and then the guard was pulling her toward the main building of the castle. Her legs felt weak and her heart was beating so hard she could barely breathe. The inside of the castle was dark and cold. The walls were made of black stone, and the only light came from torches that made scary shadows dance on the walls. The guard led her through long hallways that seemed to go on forever. Their footsteps echoed in the silence like drum beats. Finally, they stopped at a large wooden door. The guard knocked twice, and a deep voice from inside said, "Enter." The room they walked into was huge. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, and a fire burned in a fireplace big enough for Alara to stand up in. Behind a massive wooden desk sat a man who made Alara's breath catch in her throat. She had expected Lord Marcus to be old and fat and ugly like her father. Instead, she found herself looking at the most dangerous-looking man she had ever seen. He was tall and strong, with broad shoulders and muscles that showed even through his clothes. His hair was black as midnight, and his face looked like it had been carved from stone. But it was his eyes that scared her the most. They were dark gray, like storm clouds, and when he looked at her, she felt like he could see right through her, to her very soul. This had to be Lord Marcus, the man who owned her now, the man who would work her to death in his mines. "You may go," the man said to the guard, and his voice was deep and quiet. The guard bowed and left quickly, closing the door behind him. Now Alara was alone with her new master. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She wanted to scream, but no sound would come out of her throat. The man stood up from behind his desk, and Alara realized he was even bigger than she had thought. He had to be over 6 feet tall, and his chest was as wide as a tree trunk. Scars covered his hands and arms, telling stories of many fights and battles. He walked around the desk slowly, and Alara stepped back without thinking. But instead of getting angry, the man stopped and tilted his head like he was thinking about something. "You're afraid," he said. It wasn't a question. Alara nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good," the man said. "Fear keeps people alive in dangerous places. But you don't need to be afraid of me right now." He went back to his desk and picked up a piece of paper. "Your name is Alara, daughter of Lord Aldrich. He sent you here to pay a debt he owes." He looked up at her. "Do you know what that debt was for?" Alara shook her head. "Your father borrowed money to pay for your sister's wedding dress. A very expensive dress, covered in pearls and gold thread. When he couldn't pay the money back, he offered you instead." The man's voice was calm, but Alara could hear anger underneath it. He sold his own daughter to pay for a dress. The words hit Alara like a physical blow. Her father had sold her for Lucy's wedding dress, not even for something important like food or medicine or safety, for a dress. Tears started running down her face and she couldn't stop them. All this time she had thought maybe her father loved her a little bit, even if he was disappointed in her. But now she knew the truth. She meant less to him than a piece of clothing. "Sit down," the man said, pointing to a chair, "before you fall down." Alara sat, still crying. The man poured water from a pitcher into a cup and handed it to her. "Drink this." The water was cold and clean, better than anything she had tasted in days. As she drank, the man sat back down behind his desk and watched her with those storm-gray eyes. "I am Cale Thorne," he said, "lord of this castle and all the lands around it. Some people call me other names, the Shadowblade, the Deathbringer, the Monster of the North, but you can call me Lord Cale." Alara wiped her eyes and tried to stop crying. "Are you going to send me to the mines?" she asked in a small voice. Lord Cale raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you think this place is, a mining operation?" "The people on the road said so. They said you work people to death in mines." Lord Cale was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, but it wasn't a mean laugh. It sounded almost sad. "People say many things about me. Most of them are not true. I do not own any mines, Alara. This is a fortress, not a prison." "Then what happens to me?" Alara asked. "That depends on you," Lord Cale said. "You can work in the kitchens, or help in the library, or learn to take care of the horses. You will have a room of your own, food to eat, and clothes to wear. In return, you will do your job well and cause no trouble. Ilara stared at him. That's all? That's all. But the people outside, they looked like slaves. Lord Kale's face grew dark. Those people are not slaves. They are refugees, people who have run away from real monsters in other parts of the north. They work for me because I give them protection and food. Some of them have been hurt badly by their experiences, which is why they seem scared. Ilara didn't know what to think. Everything she had heard about this place was wrong. Lord Kale wasn't an evil slave master. He was just a man with a bad reputation. Why do people say such terrible things about you? She asked. Lord Kale stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sky was getting dark, and snow had started to fall. Because I am not like other lords. I don't play their games or follow their rules. I protect my people, even if it means fighting everyone else. That makes me dangerous to them, so they spread lies to make others afraid of me. He turned back to Ilara. Your father probably hoped I would work you to death or worse. He sent you here thinking he would never have to see you again, but I am not the monster he thinks I am. A knock on the door interrupted them. Come in, Lord Kale called. A woman entered, older than Ilara but younger than her father would have been. She had kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a simple bun. This is Martha, Lord Kale said. She runs the household. Martha, this is Ilara. Please show her to a room and help her get settled. Martha smiled at Ilara. Of course, my lord. Come along, dear. You look tired. As Ilara stood to follow Martha, Lord Kale spoke again. Ilara. She turned back to him. You are not your father's debt anymore. You are not payment for anything. You are a person with value and worth. Try to remember that. Ilara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As she followed Martha out of the room, she looked back once more at Lord Kale. He was standing by the window again, looking out at the falling snow. In the firelight, he didn't look like a monster at all. He looked lonely. Martha led her through more hallways, but these were different from the dark passages she had walked through before. These had windows and tapestries on the walls. They felt more like a home than a prison. Here we are, Martha said, opening a door. This will be your room. Ilara gasped. The room was small but clean and warm. There was a real bed with clean sheets, a chest for her clothes, and a window that looked out over the mountains. After sleeping in dirty inns in the back of a wagon, for more than a week it looked like paradise. There's a wash basin and clean water, Martha said. Dinner is in an hour. I'll come get you and show you to the dining hall. After Martha left, Ilara sat on the bed and tried to understand what had happened. She had come here expecting to die slowly in a mine. Instead, she had a nice room and a job and a master who seemed almost kind. Maybe her new life wouldn't be so bad after all. Ilara woke up the next morning feeling confused. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she saw the stone walls and the mountain view outside her window, and everything came back to her. She was in Lord Kale's fortress far from home, starting a new life. Someone knocked on her door softly. Come in, Ilara called. Martha entered with a tray of food. Good morning, dear. I brought you breakfast. Lord Kale thought you might want to rest this morning before starting work. The food smelled amazing. There were fresh eggs, warm bread with butter, and even some fruit. Ilara couldn't remember the last time she had eaten something so good. What kind of work will I be doing? Ilara asked as she ate. Martha sat down in the chair by the window. Well, that depends on what you're good at. Can you read and write? Yes, Ilara said. My mother taught me when I was young. I love books. Martha's face lit up. Perfect. Lord Kale has a huge library, but it's a mess. Books everywhere, no order to anything. He's been looking for someone to help organize it. Would you like that job? Ilara nodded eagerly. Working with books sounded much better than working in the kitchens or stables. After breakfast, Martha showed Ilara around the castle. It was much bigger than she had thought, with 3 floors and dozens of rooms. There were bedrooms for guests, a large dining hall, several sitting rooms, and even a room just for music. Lord Kale built most of this himself, Martha said as they walked. When he first came here, this was just a small fortress. He's been adding to it for years. How long has he lived here? Alara asked. About 10 years. He was very young when he came here, maybe 20 years old. Just a boy, really, but already famous for his fighting skills. They passed a large room with windows all along one wall. Inside, Alara could see Lord Kale practicing with a sword. He moved like a dancer, fast and smooth and powerful. Sweat covered his shirt and his hair fell across his face as he fought an imaginary enemy. He does that every morning, Martha said quietly. Says it helps him think. Alara watched him move and felt something strange in her chest. She had never seen anyone so graceful and strong at the same time. Is he married? Alara asked, then felt her face turn red. Why had she asked that? Martha smiled. No, dear. Lord Kale has never married. Says he's too busy taking care of his people to think about a wife. They continued the tour, and Alara met some of the other people who worked in the castle. There was Cook, a round woman who made the most delicious food Alara had ever tasted. There was James, the stable master, who took care of Lord Kale's horses. And there was Peter, a young man who helped with repairs around the castle. Everyone was kind to Alara, but she noticed they all spoke about Lord Kale with great respect and loyalty. They didn't seem afraid of him at all. Finally, Martha brought her to the library and Alara gasped when she saw it. The room was enormous, with shelves reaching up to a ceiling that was 3 stories high. Books were everywhere, on shelves, on tables and piles on the floor. Some looked very old with leather covers worn smooth by many hands. Others looked newer, with bright colors and gold writing on the spines. Lord Kale loves to read, Martha said. He buys books whenever he can. Find them. But as you can see, he's not very good at keeping them organized. Alara walked around the room looking at all the books. There were stories and poems, books about history and science, books about other countries and their customs. It was like a treasure cave filled with knowledge instead of gold. I can fix this, Alara said. It will take time, but I can make it beautiful. Martha patted her shoulder. I knew you were the right person for this job. Lord Kale will be so pleased. Alara spent the rest of the day exploring the library and making plans. She would group the books by subject, then arrange them in order. She would make lists so people could find what they were looking for. She would dust the shelves and fix any books that were damaged. As she worked, she found herself thinking about Lord Kale. He was so different from what she had expected. The people on the road had made him sound like a monster, but everyone in his castle seemed to love him. And he read books, lots of books. Alara had never met a man who loved reading as much as she did. That evening at dinner, Alara sat at a long table with all the other people who worked in the castle. Lord Kale sat at the head of the table, but he didn't act like he was better than everyone else. He asked people about their work, listened to their problems, and even told jokes that made everyone laugh. When he saw Alara, he smiled. Martha tells me you're going to organize my library. I'm very grateful. I've been meaning to do it myself for years, but I never seem to find the time. I love books, Alara said. It will be a pleasure, not work. What kind of books do you like to read? Lord Kale asked. Stories, mostly. Adventures and romances. But I also like books about history and science. Lord Kale's eyes lit up. I have some wonderful adventure stories. Have you ever read about the travels of Marco Polo? No, Alara said, but I'd love to. I'll find it for you tomorrow. It's about a man who traveled to the Far East and saw amazing things. For the rest of dinner, they talked about books. Lord Kale had read many of the same stories Alara loved, and he told her about others she had never heard of. Alara found herself laughing and talking more than she had in years. After dinner, Lord Kale walked with her toward her room. Alara, he said, I want you to know that you're safe here. I know this must be a frightening time for you being so far from home. It's not frightening anymore, Alara said honestly. Everyone here is so kind. It's nothing like what I expected. Lord Kale stopped walking and looked at her seriously. What did you expect? Alara felt embarrassed. I heard stories. People said you were cruel, that you worked people to death in mines. I was terrified. Lord Kale sighed. People fear what they don't understand. I've had to fight many battles too. Protect my land and my people. That makes other lords nervous, so they spread stories to make me seem like a villain. Why do you have to fight so much? Ilara asked. Because there are real monsters in this world, Lord Kale said. Raiders who steal and kill for fun. Lords who treat their people like animals. If I don't fight them, they will hurt innocent people. Ilara looked at his scarred hands and understood. You're not a monster. You're a protector. Lord Kyle smiled, and it changed his whole face. Instead of looking dangerous, he looked almost gentle. Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know. That night, as Ilara lay in her comfortable bed, she thought about her first day in her new home. Just 24 hours ago, she had been terrified and heartbroken. Now she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Lord Kale wasn't the cruel master she had feared. He was intelligent, and kind and protective of the people around him. And for some reason, he seemed to like talking to her. For the first time since leaving home, Ilara smiled as she fell asleep. Maybe her father had done her a favor by sending her away. Maybe this was where she was meant to be all along. 3 weeks passed quickly at the fortress. Ilara settled into a routine that made her happier than she had been in years. Every morning she worked in the library, organizing books and making lists. Every afternoon she helped Martha with household tasks. And every evening she ate dinner with the others and often found herself talking with Lord Kale about books and ideas. The library was slowly becoming beautiful. Ilara had organized all the history books on one wall, the science books on another, and the stories and poems on the shelves near the windows where the light was best. She had cleaned every book and polished every shelf until they gleamed. Lord Kale visited the library often, usually in the late afternoon when his other work was done. He would ask Ilara about her progress and sometimes help her reach books on the high shelves. When he stood close to her, Ilara noticed that he smelled like leather and pine trees, and that his hands were gentle despite their scars. One rainy afternoon, Lord Kale found Ilara sitting on the floor, surrounded by old books that needed repairs. Some had torn pages, others had loose bindings. That looks like hard work, he said, sitting down beside her. I don't mind, Ilara said, carefully gluing a torn page back together. These books have so many stories to tell. They deserve to be taken care of. Lord Kale picked up a book with a cracked leather cover. This one is very old. It belonged to my mother. Ilara looked up in surprise. Lord Kale rarely talked about his family. What was she like? Kind, gentle. She loved books as much as you do. Lord Kale's voice was soft. She taught me to read. When I was very young. Said that books could take you anywhere in the world even if you couldn't leave your room. Was she sick? Ilara asked gently. In a way. She was a servant in a great lord's house. When she became pregnant with me, the lord's wife was very angry. She locked my mother in a small room and only let her out to work. My mother read to pass the time and to forget how lonely she was. Ilara felt her heart break a little. That's terrible. What happened to her? She died when I was 12. After that, I was on my own. Lord Kale set the book down carefully. I promised myself that when I grew up, I would never let anyone be trapped the way she was. Is that why you helped the refugees? Ilara asked. Lord Kale nodded. Everyone deserves a safe place to live. Everyone deserves to be treated with kindness. They worked together in comfortable silence for a while, fixing the old books. Ilara found herself stealing glances at Lord Kale as he worked. His large hands were surprisingly gentle with the delicate pages, and his face was peaceful in a way she rarely saw when others were around. Ilara, Lord Kale said suddenly, would you like to learn how to defend yourself? Ilara looked up, startled. What do you mean? Fighting. Basic sword work, maybe some hand-to-hand combat. This is a dangerous part of the world, and I think everyone who lives here should know how to protect themselves. Ilara had never thought about learning to fight. Ladies weren't supposed to do such things, but then again, she wasn't really a lady anymore. She was just Ilara, trying to make a new life for herself. "Would you teach me?" she asked. Lord Kale smiled. "I would be honored to." The next morning, Alara met Lord Kale in the practice room where she had first seen him training. He had found her some simple clothes to wear, pants and a tunic instead of a dress. Alara felt strange at first, but the clothes were much easier to move in. "First, we'll work on balance and movement," Lord Kale said. "Fighting isn't just about being strong. It's about being smart and quick." He showed her how to stand, how to move her feet, how to keep her balance when someone tried to push her. Alara was clumsy at first, but Lord Kale was patient. He never got angry when she made mistakes, and he praised her when she did something right. "You're learning quickly," he said after an hour of practice. "You're stronger than you think." Alara felt a warm glow at his words. No one had ever told her she was strong before. At home, everyone always told her she was too big, too clumsy, too much. But Lord Kale made her feel like her size was a good thing. As the days passed, their training sessions became the part of the day Alara looked forward to most. Lord Kale taught her how to use a sword, how to block attacks, and how to use her opponent's strength against them. He was always careful not to hurt her, but he didn't treat her like she was made of glass either. "You have good instincts," he told her, one day after she had successfully blocked a series of his attacks. "You think before you act and you don't panic under pressure." "I had a good teacher," Alara said, then felt her face turn red. She seemed to be blushing around Lord Kale more and more lately. During their training sessions, they talked about many things. Lord Kale told her about the battles he had fought, the places he had traveled, and the people he had met. Alara told him about her childhood, her love of reading, and her dreams of seeing the world beyond her father's lands. "Why did you never marry?" Alara asked one day, as they rested between practice rounds. Lord Kale was quiet for a long moment. "I suppose I never found the right person. Most women are afraid of me. The few who aren't are usually more interested in my title and my castle than in me as a person." "That must be lonely," Alara said. "It was," Lord Kale said, looking at her, "with those gray eyes that seem to see everything, but it's getting less lonely lately." Alara felt her heart speed up. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? Their friendship deepened as spring turned toward summer. They spent hours talking about books, sharing meals, and working side by side in the library. Alara found herself thinking about Lord Kale even when he wasn't around. She noticed the way he smiled when he saw her, the way he listened carefully to everything she said, and the way he seemed to light up when she laughed. One evening, they were sitting in the library reading when a storm started outside. Thunder crashed and lightning lit up the sky. Alara had always been afraid of storms, and she must have jumped when a particularly loud clap of thunder shook the castle. "Are you all right?" Lord Kale asked, looking up from his book. "I don't like storms," Alara admitted. "They remind me of the night my mother died. There was a terrible storm that night." Without hesitation, Lord Kale moved from his chair to sit beside Alara on the sofa. "Would it help if I read to you? Sometimes focusing on a story can help block out scary sounds." Alara nodded, and Lord Kale began reading from a book of poems. His voice was deep and soothing, and gradually Alara's fear faded away. She found herself leaning against his shoulder, feeling safe and warm despite the storm raging outside. When the storm finally passed, they realized they had fallen asleep together on the sofa. Alara woke up with her head on Lord Kale's chest, and she could hear his heart beating steadily beneath her ear. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Alara," Lord Kale said softly. She looked up at him, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It was the same feeling she had been trying to ignore in herself. He cared for her, maybe even loved her, the same way she was starting to love him. But before either of them could say anything, Martha knocked on the library door. "Breakfast is ready," she called. The moment was broken, but something had changed between them. As they walked to the dining hall together, Alara knew that what she felt for Lord Kale was more than friendship, and from the way he looked at her, she dared to hope that he might feel the same way about her. Summer brought changes to the fortress and to Alara herself. The library was now completely organized and beautiful. with every book in its proper place. But Lord Kale had given her new responsibilities that went far beyond taking care of books. "You have a good mind for organization," he had told her one morning. "Would you be willing to help me with some of my other work?" Now Alara helped Lord Kale manage the fortress. She kept track of supplies, organized the schedules for the guards, and even helped him write letters to other lords. She discovered that she was good at solving problems and making things run smoothly. The people who worked in the castle began coming to her when they had questions or concerns. At first, this made Alara nervous. She wasn't used to being important, or having people depend on her. But gradually, she realized that she enjoyed helping others and that she was actually good at it. "You're becoming quite the leader," Martha told her one day as they worked together in the kitchen garden. "People respect you." "I never thought of myself as a leader," Alara said, carefully picking tomatoes and putting them in a basket. "That's what makes you a good one," Martha said with a smile. "You care more about helping others than about having power over them." Alara's fighting skills had improved dramatically too. She could now hold her own against Lord Kale for several minutes before he disarmed her, and she had learned to use a bow and arrow as well as a sword. More importantly, she felt strong and confident in a way she never had before. "You move like a warrior now," Lord Kale told her after a particularly good practice session. "Strong and sure of yourself." Alara looked down at her body, which had changed over the months of good food and physical training. She was still larger than most women, but now her size came from muscle rather than softness. Her arms were strong from lifting heavy books and wielding swords. Her legs were powerful from all the running and jumping in her training. She felt healthy and capable instead of ashamed. One day, a group of merchants came to the fortress to trade goods. Alara was in charge of negotiating with them, since Lord Kale was busy with other matters. The lead merchant was a rude man who tried to cheat them with high prices and poor quality goods. "I'm not dealing with some servant girl," the merchant said dismissively when Alara questioned his prices. "Where is your master?" "I am Lord Kale's representative," Alara said calmly. "If you want to trade here, you'll deal with me." The merchant laughed. "A woman? Managing a lord's business? That's ridiculous." Alara felt her temper rising, but she kept her voice steady. "Perhaps you would prefer to take your goods elsewhere. I'm sure other fortresses would be happy to have your business." The poor merchant's laugh died. Trade was hard to come by in the northern territories, and he needed this sale. "Now let's not be hasty," he said. "I'm sure we can work something out." By the end of the negotiation, Alara had gotten them a much better deal than the merchant had originally offered. When Lord Kale heard about it, he was impressed. "You handled that perfectly," he said. "You were firm but fair, and you didn't let him intimidate you." "I was so angry," Alara admitted. "The way he talked about women like we're all stupid and helpless." "You showed him how wrong he was," Lord Kale said. "I'm proud of you." Those words made Alara's heart glow with happiness. She had never had anyone be proud of her before. As autumn approached, Alara realized that she barely thought about her old life anymore. She had been at the fortress for 6 months, and it felt more like home than her father's house ever had. She was happy here, useful here, valued here. But the biggest change was in how she felt about herself. The girl who had left her father's house feeling worthless and ashamed was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her own worth, who could solve problems and lead people and stand up for herself. Part of this change came from the work she was doing and the skills she was learning, but a bigger part came from the way Lord Kale treated her. He listened to her opinions, asked for her advice, and trusted her with important responsibilities. He made her feel intelligent and capable and valuable, and somewhere along the way, her feelings for him had grown into something deep and powerful. She loved the way he laughed at her jokes, the way he explained complicated things with patience, and the way he treated everyone around him with respect and kindness. She loved his strength and his gentleness, his intelligence and his integrity. She thought maybe he might love her too. Sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression that made her heart race. During their training sessions, his touch would linger a little longer than necessary when he helped her up or adjusted her stance. When they worked together in his study, He would find reasons to stand close to her, but neither of them had spoken about their feelings. Ilara wasn't sure why. Maybe because she was still technically a servant in his household. Maybe because they came from such different backgrounds. Or maybe because they were both afraid of ruining the friendship they had. Built one evening in late autumn, Lord Kale called Ilara to his study. When she arrived, she found him standing by the window looking out at the mountains. He seemed troubled about something. "You wanted to see me?" Ilara asked. Lord Kale turned around, and she saw worry in his gray eyes. "I received a letter today," he said. "From your father?" Ilara's stomach dropped. "What does it say?" "He wants you to come home. He says he has found you a husband, and he expects you to return immediately to marry this man." Ilara stared at him. "After all this time? After selling me like a piece of property? Apparently your sister is having trouble in her marriage, and your father thinks having you back home will somehow help." Lord Kale's voice was tight with anger. "He offers to pay me the original debt in gold if I send you back." "What did you tell him?" Ilara asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. "I told him the debt was already paid in full, and that you are free to make your own choices." Lord Kale walked closer to her. "But Ilara, the choice has to be yours. If you want to go home, if you want to marry this man your father has chosen, I won't stop you." Ilara looked into his eyes and saw pain there. He was trying to do the right thing, even though it would hurt him to let her go. "Do you want me to leave?" she asked. "No," Lord Kale said without hesitation. "I want you to stay. I want you to stay more than I've ever wanted anything in my life." The words hung in the air between them, full of meaning that neither of them had dared to speak before. "Then I'll stay," Ilara said. "This is my home now. You are my home now." Lord Kale's face showed relief and joy and something deeper. "Ilara," he said softly, taking a step closer to her. But before he could say anything else, there was a commotion outside. Shouts and the sound of horses' hooves filled the courtyard. Lord Kale's expression immediately changed to one of alertness and concern. "Stay here," he said, moving toward the door. But Ilara followed him. Whatever was happening, she wanted to face it beside him. They were partners now in everything. The commotion in the courtyard turned out to be a messenger, riding hard from the eastern borders. His horse was covered in sweat and foam, and the man himself looked exhausted and frightened. "Raiders, my lord," the messenger gasped as Lord Kale and Ilara rushed outside. "A large group, maybe 50 men. They've attacked 3 villages already. They're heading this way." Lord Kale's face became hard as stone. "How far away?" "Half a day's ride, maybe less. They're moving fast and leaving nothing behind them." Immediately, the fortress sprang into action. Lord Kale shouted orders to his guards, who began preparing weapons and securing the gates. Other people ran to bring the animals inside the walls and gather supplies. "Ilara," Lord Kale said, turning to her, "I need you to help organize the civilians. Get everyone who can't fight into the safest part of the castle. Make sure they have water and food." Ilara nodded and hurried away to do as he asked. She gathered Martha, Cook, and the other non-fighters and led them to the inner keep, which had the thickest walls. She made sure the children were calm and the elderly were comfortable. All the time, her heart was pounding with fear for Lord Kale. As the sun began to set, lookouts on the walls spotted the raiders approaching. Ilara climbed to the battlements to see for herself, despite Lord Kale's orders to stay inside. The raiders were a terrifying sight. They rode wild horses and carried weapons that gleamed in the dying light. Their leader was a huge man with a thick beard and scars covering his arms. Even from a distance, Ilara could see the cruelty in his face. "They call him Iron Tooth," one of the guards told her quietly. "He's killed more people than anyone can count. Takes pleasure in hurting innocents." Lord Kale stood on the walls above the main gate, looking down at the approaching army. He wore his black armor and carried his famous sword, the one that had earned him the name Shadowblade. Even outnumbered, he looked dangerous and unafraid. Iron Tooth rode close to the walls and shouted up at them. Open your gates, Lord Kale. Give us your gold and your people, and we might let some of you live. You know my answer, Lord Kale called back. Leave my lands now, and I might let some of you live. Iron-Tooth laughed, a sound like grinding metal. You're outnumbered 2-1, boy. Your reputation won't save you this time. My reputation was built on defeating men like you, Lord Kale replied calmly. Come and test it if you dare. The battle began just as the last light faded from the sky. The raiders attacked the walls with ladders and ropes, trying to climb over. Lord Kale's defenders fought them back with arrows and swords, but there were so many attackers. Alara watched from her position on the walls, her heart in her throat every time she saw Lord Kale in danger. He fought like a man possessed, his sword cutting through enemies with deadly precision. But even he couldn't be everywhere at once. A group of raiders managed to get over the wall on the far side of the courtyard. They were heading toward the building where the civilians were hiding. Without thinking, Alara grabbed a sword and ran to intercept them. Stop, she shouted. You won't hurt these people. The raiders laughed when they saw her. A woman? This will be easy. But Alara had been training for months with the best fighter in the kingdom. When the first raider attacked her, she parried his blow and struck back, cutting him down. The second one was more careful, but Alara was faster than he expected. She used his own weight against him, just as Lord Kale had taught her, and sent him crashing into a wall. The third raider was bigger and stronger than the others. He swung his sword at Alara's head, and she barely got her own weapon up in time to block it. The force of the blow drove her to her knees, and she felt her strength giving out. Just as the raider raised his sword for the killing blow, Lord Kale appeared like a shadow behind him. His blade went through the man's chest, and the raider fell, dead at Alara's feet. Are you hurt? Lord Kale asked urgently, helping her to stand. I'm fine, Alara said, though her hands were shaking. The civilians? Safe, thanks to you. Lord Kale's eyes were fierce with pride and something else. That was incredibly brave and incredibly foolish. Before Alara could respond, more shouts erupted from across the courtyard. Iron-Tooth himself had made it over the walls with a group of his best fighters. They were cutting through Lord Kale's guards like they were made of paper. Stay here, Lord Kale ordered Alara. Promise me. But as he ran toward the fight, Alara saw something that made her blood freeze. Another raider was climbing over the wall behind Lord Kale, raising a crossbow and aiming it at his back. Lord Kale was too busy fighting Iron-Tooth to see the danger. Without hesitation, Alara ran toward the hidden archer. She reached him just as he fired, throwing herself between the crossbow bolt and Lord Kale. The bolt hit her in the shoulder, spinning her around and sending her crashing to the ground. The pain was like fire spreading through her body, but Alara managed to grab her sword and drive it into the archer's leg before he could reload. He screamed and fell, and other guards rushed over to finish him. Lord Kale turned at the sound of the scream and saw Alara on the ground, blood spreading across her shirt. Something changed in his face, something terrifying and final. He looked at Iron-Tooth with the fury of a man who had nothing left to lose. The fight that followed was like something out of a legend. Lord Kale moved with speed and strength that seemed impossible, cutting through Iron-Tooth's men like they were made of straw. When he finally faced Iron-Tooth himself, the battle was brief and brutal. Within minutes, the raider leader was dead, and his remaining men were fleeing into the night. But Lord Kale barely noticed his victory. He ran to where Alara lay, dropping his sword and falling to his knees beside her. You stupid, wonderful, brave woman, he said, his voice breaking as he examined her wound. Why did you do that? Because I love you, Alara said weakly. Because I couldn't watch you die. Lord Kale's hands were shaking as he carefully lifted her and carried her toward the castle. You could have been killed. That bolt was meant for me. Better me than you, Alara said, then winced as pain shot through her shoulder. Don't you ever say that again, Lord Kale said fiercely. Don't you ever think that your life is worth less than mine. He carried her to his own room and sent for the healer. As the woman worked to clean and bandage Alara's wound, Lord Kale paced back and forth like a caged animal. The bolt didn't hit anything vital, the healer said finally. She'll be weak for a few days, but she'll recover completely. After the healer left, Lord Kale sat on the edge of the bed and took Alara's hand in both of his. When I saw you fall, he said quietly, I thought my world had ended. I realized that nothing else matters to me. Not this castle, not my reputation, not my duty to my people. Nothing matters except you. Alara looked into his gray eyes and saw love there, pure and deep and overwhelming. I love you too, she said. I have for months. I was just afraid to say it. Afraid of what? Lord Kale asked, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. Afraid you could never love someone like me. Someone who was given away by her own father. Someone who isn't beautiful or graceful or noble. Lord Kale cupped her face with his free hand. Alara, you are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Not because of how you look, though I think you're perfect, but because of who you are. You're brave and kind and intelligent and strong. You're everything I never dared to hope for. Really? Alara asked, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. Really? Lord Kale said, and then he leaned down and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. Marry me, Lord Kale said suddenly. I know we haven't talked about it. I know it's sudden, but I can't imagine my life without you. Will you be my wife? Alara felt her heart soar with joy. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I'll marry you. Lord Kale kissed her again, deeper this time, and Alara felt like she was flying. The girl who had been thrown away like garbage had found a man who loved her exactly as she was. The woman who had been told she was worthless had become precious beyond measure to the strongest, most honorable man she had ever known. I love you, she whispered against his lips. And I love you, he whispered back. Forever and always, my brave, beautiful Alara. 1 year later, Alara stood in the same courtyard where she had first arrived, frightened and heartbroken. But everything about that day was different now. The courtyard was decorated with flowers and ribbons, and filled with people celebrating her first wedding anniversary with Lord Kale. She was no longer the scared girl who had been given away by her father. She was Lady Alara Thorne, wife to the most respected lord in the Northern Territories, and a leader in her own right. The people of the fortress looked to her for guidance, and travelers came from far and wide seeking her wisdom in settling disputes. You look beautiful, Lord Kale said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. Though you look beautiful every day. Alara leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Do you remember what you said to me that first day? That I wasn't payment for anything, that I was a person with value and worth? I remember everything about that day, Lord Kale said, kissing the top of her head. I remember thinking that your father was a fool to give you away, and wondering what kind of man could be so blind to his own daughter's worth. I'm glad he was blind, Alara said. If he hadn't been, I never would have found you. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by Martha, who hurried over with a letter in her hand. My lord, my lady, this just arrived by messenger. Alara recognized the seal immediately. It was from her father. Lord Kale opened the letter and read it aloud. My dear Lord Kale, I hope this letter finds you well. I have heard rumors of my daughter's marriage to you, and I confess I am surprised. I always thought Alara was too plain and awkward to attract a husband of your standing. Perhaps I was wrong about her worth. I would very much like to visit and see how she fares. I have recently lost my wife in a hunting accident, and I find myself in need of a place to stay. Surely Alara would not refuse her own father. I also have a proposal for a business arrangement that could benefit us both. Your obedient servant, Lord Aldrich. Alara felt a familiar stab of pain at her father's words. Even now, even after everything, he still saw her as plain and awkward. And the fact that he only wanted to see her now that she was married to a powerful lord made his motives very clear. He lost his wife? Alara asked, confused. But my mother died years ago. He remarried, Lord Kale said quietly. About 6 months after you left. a young woman with a large dowry. The marriage lasted less than a year before she left him for another man. How do you know that? Alara asked. Lord Kale looked embarrassed. I may have kept track of what was happening in your father's household. I wanted to make sure he wasn't mistreating Lucy or trying to cause trouble for you. Alara felt her heart swell with love for her husband, even when she wasn't thinking. About her old life, he had been protecting her from it. What do you want to do about the letter? Lord Kale asked. It's your choice entirely. Alara thought for a moment. A year ago, she would have been desperate for any sign that her father might care about her. She would have welcomed him with open arms, hoping for some word of love or regret. But now she saw the letter for what it really was. Her father didn't want to see her because he missed her or because he was sorry for what he had done. He wanted to see her because she was useful to him now, because she was married to someone important. I'll write him back, Alara said finally. She went to Lord Kale's study and sat down at the desk where she had spent so many hours working beside her husband. Taking up a pen, she began to write. Dear Father, I received your letter and I must say I am surprised to hear from you after all this time. You say you are surprised that I found a husband, but I am not surprised at all. Lord Kale saw in me what you never could, intelligence, strength, and worth. You asked to visit and you mention a business arrangement. I think it's interesting that you want to see me only now that I am married to a powerful lord. For 19 years I lived in your house and tried to earn your love. You made it very clear that I was a disappointment and a burden. You gave me a way to pay for Lucy's wedding dress. Not for food or medicine or safety, but for a dress. You sold your own daughter for a piece of clothing, and now you want to come here and profit from the life I have built without you. I forgive you, Father. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger would only hurt me. But I will not welcome you into my home or my life. You gave up the right to call me daughter when you treated me like property. I hope you find peace and happiness in your life, but you will not find it here. Your daughter no longer, Lady Alara Thorne. When she finished writing, Alara read the letter over twice. It was firm but not cruel, honest but not bitter. She signed it with her new name and sealed it with Lord Kale's crest. Lord Kale found her there a few minutes later. Are you all right? He asked, seeing the letter on the desk. I'm perfect, Alara said, and she meant it. I told him no. I told him that I'm not his daughter anymore and that he's not welcome here. Lord Kale smiled and pulled her into his arms. I'm proud of you. That took courage. A year ago, I would have begged him to visit. I would have hoped that maybe he had changed, that maybe he could love me now. Alara shook her head. But I don't need his love anymore. I have yours, and I have the love of all the people here who have become my real family. And you always will, Lord Kale promised. That evening, as the anniversary celebration continued in the courtyard, Alara looked around at all the people who had gathered to honor her and Lord Kale. There was Martha, beaming with pride as she served the cake she had made specially for the occasion. There was Tom, the old wagon driver who had brought her north and who now visited regularly because he said the fortress felt like home. There were the guards who had once been strangers, but were now loyal friends. There were the refugees who had found safety and purpose under Lord Kale's protection, and who looked to Alara as their advocate and protector. Do you ever regret it? Lord Kale asked, as they danced together under the stars. Leaving your old life behind? Alara looked into his gray eyes, which were warm with love and happiness. How could I regret it? That life was never really mine anyway. This is my life. You are my life. And it's more beautiful than anything I ever dared to dream. You saved me too, you know, Lord Kale said. I was so lonely before you came. I had duty and responsibility, but I didn't have joy. You brought light into my dark world. We saved each other, Alara said. As they spun around the courtyard, Alara thought about the girl she had been and the woman she had become. Her father had meant to hurt her when he gave her away, but instead he had given her the greatest gift imaginable. He had sent her to the one person in the world who could see her true worth, who could love her not despite her differences, but because of them. She was not too much. She was not too big or too awkward or too plain. She was exactly enough. She was exactly right. She was exactly who she was meant to be. And in Lord Kale's arms, surrounded by people who loved and respected her, Ilara knew that she was finally, truly home. The girl who had been given away for being fat had found a man who looked at her like no one ever had before, with complete love, total acceptance, and absolute devotion. And that look in his eyes told her everything she needed to know about her own worth. She was precious. She was cherished. She was loved. And she always would be.